All right, hello everybody. Good morning. Let's do some more Alka Mortis development. So I've made a bunch of progress. My to-do list is very small now. I've fixed a bunch of bugs. I've been working on getting some new music into the game, and also just been working on sound effects generally. They're basically three things that I have to do now for the playtest to be not necessarily ready, but to be to have all the features and the fixes that I want to have for the next playtest. So 3 more things to do before I say, okay, this is playtest ready. And of course, I'm going to have to do my own internal playtesting, my own balancing to make sure everything's still feeling good, because we did make a bunch of changes. But I think today maybe we'll do some fun stuff. We can add some new content or something. I have an idea for a type of card that I want to make. So we'll start with that and we'll see what happens. But before we get into all that, I want to remind everyone that Alka Mortis is available for wish listing on Steam. So if you would do that, I would very much appreciate that. You could also support me on Patreon if you join at the top tier here. That's like pre-purchasing Alka Mortis. So I'll send you a Steam key when the game launches, and your name will be listed in the in-game Alka Mortis credits as well. You also get some other perks like early access to videos as well as ad-free videos. So anytime I make a new YouTube video, I throw that up, and I just did that this morning. So there's a new short micro tutorial out, and it's available right now on Patreon for subscribers, but that will be out on YouTube tomorrow. And then I also have the Udemy courses, which you could purchase if you're interested in learning how to build complete games in the Godot engine. All right, and there's also the Discord linked below, all that good stuff. Check it out. Would definitely appreciate it. Hello, Kazuyoshi. Welcome. Good to see you. It's time for instance placeholder once again. Yes, indeed. Instance placeholder. Hello, V, and welcome back, Jhar, by the way. Hello, Asymmetrics. Heard you were going to human beatbox all the music in the game. No. That's funny, though. Good morning, Emerson. Good to see you. He's also voice acting every card's hit, grunt, and dying noise himself. Oh, gosh. No thanks. No thank you. Wow. Maybe I'll open up another Patreon tier that's like super expensive, and then if somebody buys that, then I'll do that. All right, anyway. So there's a card type that I want to make. Where did I write this? Yeah. Nope. Where did I not write that down? Oh, I put it at the top. So I want to make a card that gains damage permanently every time it gets paralyzed. I think that could be interesting. Permanently might be a little bit too powerful, but we will see. We will see. I would make that deal pretty good deal, yeah. So I want to do this ability. I might actually make the ability first before we figure out what kind of card to put it on. Because I wonder, I'm kind of curious to see if I can support that already. So what I'm going to do, we'll just take the lamb bone ring and I'll just add the ability that I'm thinking of doing here. And then we'll remove it. And move it over to the whatever card we create for this. What in the heck? Why are you doing this, Copilot? Just getting this all set up here. Oh yeah, tier. Description func. Okay, so I think what I need is I need an ability type tracker provider. And what does this need? A type ability type. So the problem is so yeah, this is what I was thinking was going to be what's going to happen. So I want this. So my ability type tracker provider can only really track when a type of ability is executed, but it has no ability to track when a type of ability is executed against a specific card. So that's what I would want to do in this case. If I'm trying to make an ability where it gains damage every time it's paralyzed, then it has to know what card it's on, what card it's affecting. And I actually don't know. I actually don't know how to do this. This is going to be an interesting one. Hello, Bubblegum Lord. Welcome, welcome. Then a card that paralyzes your own cards would be great synergy instead of a drawback. Yeah, I have at least one card that paralyzes your own cards right now. I have at least one. Good morning, Fox Shadow. Welcome back. Good to see you. Or self-paralysis has a negative alchemy effect. Exactly, yeah. So I think this is going to be a great ability to add to the game. I just don't know if my code, as it stands right now, supports it. So I have a need to like listen for ability executions, and I don't really like the approach that I've been taking to this. Let's see. Ability execution listener. On ability executed. So we've got the enhanced context. Does this context... Yeah, so we have the target info here. Okay. So we have the target info on ability executed. I think there's another thing that I'm missing here, which is that abilities can't typically get a reference to the card that they're on. And so I have no way of checking. Like, if I'm an ability and I'm listening for other abilities, but I need a condition that says, I want to listen for another ability that applies to the card that I am on right now. I don't have that piece of information. Like, abilities are completely agnostic as to what card they're on. So I'm going to need to address that as well. I think what I may do... So we have this on ability executed here. Update count. Yeah, I don't really know if I want to extend this. I probably don't. Probably don't. So on ability executed, I wonder if I could just make a generic. ability execution listener. So I need to listen for paralysis that applies to the card that I'm on. On ability executed. Yeah, okay. I think I know how I want to approach this. So what I'm going to do is, if I go to my card abilities, again, I'm trying to make just a generic ability system that has a bunch of building blocks that I can use. So in an effort to extend that, what I'm going to create is I'm going to create ability listener.cs. So an ability is basically anything that can execute during the card's life cycle. It's basically just a modular piece of functionality that gets added into an abilities array, and then I call execute on all the abilities. But these abilities, like this one here, this ability list provider, this is just providing data. So when the card goes and executes this ability, all that it does is it gets the base card flattened abilities here. And then I can use those abilities for whatever other conditional logic I need. But this is like technically an ability that technically gets executed during the turn of the card, but it doesn't have any visible impact on the game, and this may not even show up anywhere in a description. So it's just a building block. And so for the ability listener, I think I'm going to do the same thing. Or I'm going to implement this iAbility listener, iAbility execution listener. We'll implement this, implement interface. We'll return empty result from execute. And then what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to, no, I don't want this. I don't want that. Board target. Why is this here? Why does this need a board target? I don't think that this needs to be... This doesn't need to be here. I don't think that needs to be a thing. That's why that was confusing me. Final implementation. Yeah, this is only implemented in 2 places. So I don't need that. That could just be, board target could just be for the ability type tracker provider. This one, this iAbility execution listener, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass in, let's see, action, execution, context with state. Can I do that? Because it doesn't matter. Okay, and then in here, we're just going to call action. Okay, so the reason I needed to do this is because my code that notifies this is looking for iAbility execution listeners. So I basically just created a separate ability now. It's just a very bare bones ability that implements that, but now I can pass in my own action sort of in line here for how I want to handle or listen for that ability execution. So now I could do ability listener, and then I could pass in here context, executing ability, and listener card, like so. And so now I can define that functionality here in line. And then I just add this ability type tracker provider to that list there. So now I can basically just put whatever I want in here, and I don't have to worry about how do I implement this interface, you know what I mean? So this is a way of getting like way around the problem where like Lambda functions can't implement interfaces, obviously. So basically just create a wrapper around them. It still have the benefits of being able to define it in line and use these like scoped variables out here. while also having this get called during sort of the normal life cycle of the card. So I think that'll work. And I didn't realize that this is also passing the listener card in, which is weird. How does that actually work? Listener card. All listeners. All cards select card get flattened ability. Oh, I see. Okay. So I have the listener card here. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Any of you heard of the Godot 3D game called Frog Piercer? Playing the demo is awesome. Frog Piercer. I have not heard of that. Let's take a look. Frog Piercer. Oh, Fog Piercer. I thought it said, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. Frog Piercer. It's not frog, it's fog. Oh, I'm less interested in the game now. I thought Frog Piercer was going to be like a frog-based fencing game or something. No, it's Fog Piercer. Okay, all right. Well, that is slightly less interesting to me. No, it looks good. It looks good. So this is a roguelite deck builder. Let's see. This looks great though for a Godot game, like a 3D Godot game. I guess I'm just so used to seeing like amateurish, that's no offense to anyone, but I'm used to seeing like amateurish Godot 3D prototypes or just like very early stage prototypes. So I'm like, I guess I'm a little bit shocked to see something in Godot 3D that's like really, really polished. That looks great. Look at that. It's a very, very interesting take on that whole, on that deck builder genre. And there's a demo, very nice. Yeah, I might try that. Looks cool. Hello, Vicious the End. Are you feeling good? I am, yes. I'm a little bit tired, but that's about it. I'm feeling all right. Welcome back to the stream, by the way. Hello, Michael. Welcome, welcome. Going to sleep. Fog Piercer looks interesting and pretty. Yeah, it does. Hello, everyone. Hello, Nanto Game Dev. Will Gunforge get more updates and DualSense support? Probably not. Probably not. If I ever revisited Gunforged, I think I'd probably just make a Gunforged 2. I read it at Frog Piercer at first glance too, yeah. Hello, Matt. Welcome. Good morning to you as well. I finally got started on your C# Godot course, about 10 lessons in, and already learned several new things I hadn't picked up before. Nice work. Awesome. Glad to hear that. And thanks for picking up the course. Very much appreciate that. And welcome again. That's a free game idea, yeah. Frog Piercer. Good morning, Ninja Link. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to say, let's see, executing ability. So let's do this. Var. Let's do stacks is equal to 0. If listener card is equal to context. Wait a minute. Oh, wait, let's do this. If executing ability is paralysis. Wait a minute. This is using a buff applicator. So I think that's the new way. I just want to make sure that I'm not like, maybe if I do this, new paralysis debuff. So that's a buff applicator, buff applicator. You know what? Actually, I wonder, instead of looking for the ability, maybe what I should do instead is listen for a buff application or debuff application. Card buff container, card buff added. That would certainly be easier. We are not listening for that anywhere in the base card, though. Okay, well, we'll just try to do it this way. So, new... Oops, that's not what I wanted. So the problem is if I ever... Like in the Basilisk guy, this is an artifact. This is just applying that buff directly. This is just applying that buff directly, and so the problem is that if I have like an artifact that is affecting, like if it paralyzes the card, that's not going to be picked up because what the card is doing is it's looking for an ability that is going to apply the buff. It's not responding directly to any time a paralysis buff is applied. So the vast majority of cases, you know, the debuff is going to be applied through this buff applicator ability, which is just a generic way of applying buffs. So that's what's going to happen in the normal course of combat, but for the sake of avoiding any future issues, I should probably just make it responsive as well to any time a paralysis debuff gets added. Now the problem though is that if I look at my base card, do I have the card buff container here? Yeah, I do. Am I doing anything with this? Execute abilities, buff container. How do I want to do this? So the buff container already can emit signals, and I could... Well, I was going to say I could maybe hook into some signals here. Shoot, what am I going to do here? Is there a way in the Basilisk Eye to just execute? No. Well, I was thinking maybe I should make this go through the ability system anyway. Maybe I should support external third-party things executing abilities, because what that could do is that could add that to my turn history as well. Because I think what I'm going to want in the future is I'm going to want to support saying something in the combat log like Basilisk Eye, paralyzed, you know, such and such for 8 turns. But that's an artifact. That's not one of the cards that's in play. So there's an opportunity here to potentially extend my turn history and my ability system to allow unrelated third-party things to act on cards in a way that goes through that whole system so that it gets ultimately logged to the combat log. But I just don't think that's not appropriate to start right now. That would certainly make it cleaner, but I think I need to listen for the buff being applied specifically. I think I have like a status provider. Status component, status component, status ticked, status applied. Oh, that's a status, that's not a debuff. Okay, so this buff container, I just don't know if this is going to work. This is a ref counted. So what I could do, I mean, I could do this buff container dot card buff added, but I don't want to do that. Hello, Dragonod. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Clicker Tail, hello, welcome. What kind of stuff are we working on today? Well, I'm making a new card. I'm making a new ability right now. Right now, we're trying to make an ability where the damage increases permanently every time the card is paralyzed. So my system does not currently support that, so we're going to fix that. But I'm going to need a new signal here. Signal, public, delegate, void, card buff added or updated, event handler. Emit signal, card buff added or updated. And then here, emit signal, card buff added or updated. Maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe I'll just do card buff added, card buff updated, and we'll just do both separately. Okay, so we've got the card buff updated. So in here, what we're going to do is we are going to do this. Card buff added plus equals on card buff added or updated. Card buff updated there. Okay. Private void on card buff added or updated. So the other thing is I don't have any way of knowing whether the card is in combat or not. So I guess it's feasible that paralysis could be applied to the card outside of the normal combat situation. But I think that's okay because that should basically never happen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get flattened abilities of type. We are going to do, I need to create a new ability now. So let's do iAbility execution listener. Let's create a new file, iCard buff listener. Namespace game.data.ability. Public interface, iCard buff listener. On card buff added or updated. Then we go back to the base card. Apply that. Why is this still wrong? Is it just... Yeah. So get all flattened abilities of type iCard buff listener. We'll call on card buff added or updated. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing that I did with this ability listener. We're going to do a new file, card buff listener.cs. Basically going to copy this, paste this here. This is a card buff listener. And here's my action, card buff. This is an iCard buff listener, on card buff added or updated. There we go. Okay, so now we've got a card buff listener. So instead of doing this, which I'm going to keep this because that's going to be useful, but we're going to do var card buff listener is equal to new card buff listener buff, and then we'll do our filtering in here. If buff is not paralysis debuff, then we're just going to return. Okay, otherwise, const base, let's do base damage per stack is equal to 2. Const int base damage per stack. So we could do stacks plus plus, like so. Okay, then we'll put the card buff listener here. Okay, so now we can do the var value scalar is equal to new value scalar. source provider. What in the heck? What in tarnation? Source provider, how do I... Wait, can I not just pass in like a flat value here? Oh, it scales something that has... What in tarnation? iAbility value provider. Okay, well, I could just do something similar. I don't know. I just don't have a way of scaling like just like a value that I'm tracking. So the value scaler requires an object of iAbility value provider to work. But this value scaler will give me the ability to scale a value in a various number of ways. It's just I don't have the ability to support just an integer count that I'm keeping track of separate from a class. So what I'm going to need to do then is probably just do this again. We just keep following the pattern we have. We're going to do generic value provider.cs namespace game.data.ability public class generic value provider iAbility value provider. This we're going to do func t value func, and then we're going to do value. We're just going to call that function there. Okay, so now we can do this. Stacks provider is equal to new generic value provider int. We just return stacks out of that function so that it updates internally, so that every time this gets called, it's going to return that stacks value. If I had just passed in stacks as an argument here, obviously that's not passed by reference, so it would never return the updated stacks value. So that's why this needs to be wrapped in a function, so that every time that function gets invoked, it's guaranteed to return the up-to-date stacks value. And then I can do the stacks provider here, and then what I can do is I can take this value scaler, set multiplier, base damage per stack. So now it's going to say, well, it's going to multiply the stacks by 2 because we're going to have 2 damage per stack. Then I got to put the stacks provider here so that that updates as well, or just so it's in the ability list. And then we can actually do the damage. So var dynamic damage is equal to new dynamic damage, or dynamic magnitude ability rather. We pass the value scaler in, and then we also pass the target ability, which is new damage. And we could just make this 0. So that's basically how the system works. So this dynamic magnitude ability now takes a iAbility value provider. So it could be anything. The value scaler is an iAbility value provider. And what will happen is when this executes, this dynamic magnitude ability, it will look at its target ability, it will set the magnitude. Oh, I don't need this. That was just irrelevant. So it will set this to the value provider value, that magnitude in there, and then it will execute the underlying damage here. So then I can just put the dynamic damage in here. Scaling func var damage scaler is equal to ability scalars.get damage scaler. And then we're going to say var scaled damage is equal to damage scaler tier Why is this not working? I feel like this is... Yeah, this is not working. Hold on. Let me reload the window. I think my IntelliSense or Copilot is bugged. May I ask why? I don't know why that would be a bad idea. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't remember what this is referring to. If you want to refresh my memory on what you were asking about. So your inventory a UI node and the two game board nodes 2Ds are tile map layers. They are tile map layers. They are tile map layers. Is IntelliSense some sort of AI? No, IntelliSense is just an autocomplete based on what already exists. I think that's generally how it works. I mean, who knows what... I don't know if any of these IntelliSense algorithms are like open source or whatever, but yeah, who knows? Okay, damage scaler. Base damage per stack tier. Okay. Did I finally do it? And then we can do value scaler dot set multiplier scaled damage. Okay. So now in the description here, I'm just going to follow the... I'm going to follow the pattern that I have for other abilities. So deal damage. Damage increases by... Oh, I need to get the... Oh no, value scaler dot get multiplier. Damage increases by value scalar multiplier. Oh, wait. Every permanently. Every time this card is paralyzed. Okay. So now, let's go ahead and add that composed ability and see what we did. Let's see what we did. Gotcha, yeah. Yeah, I'm using a weird mixture of Node 2Ds and UI nodes. Basically, I'm using UI nodes mostly because it's a very mouse input heavy game. And using something like Area 2Ds or like the physics system for picking mouse is just not as responsive as I would like it to be. So everything that is a mouse interaction in this game is using a control node in some way. Just about everything. 99% of everything. Curly braces, yeah. 99% of everything, but even like, I've mentioned this before, but when I hover over these cards, what's actually under the hood here is that there are several square control nodes that basically just position themselves over each cell that the card is occupying. So your first instinct might be, oh, well, if I have a card of a weird shape, then certainly a polygonal collision area would be the best, right? But again, it's not responsive enough. There's tons of problems with the physics input handling, and not to mention one major problem is that the physics picking system, the system that detects mouse events inside of a physics area, that happens last in the input chain, which can be a huge problem because let's say that I want like a click on a card to block that click from propagating to any node behind it. That becomes exceedingly difficult to do with a physics-based approach using the physics system or Area 2Ds or whatever. So instead, I just created a bunch of single square control nodes that sit on each tile of the card, and then I just coordinate all their mouse input and mouse exit events to act as one coherent unit. And that ends up working much nicer from an input propagation management perspective. So anyway, I don't know if that's interesting. I feel like I'm an old man sometimes just like reminiscing about the good old days and everyone's falling asleep. But anyway, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop. Deal 0 damage. Damage increases by 2 permanently every time this card is paralyzed. Okay. Oh, you know what, though? Son of a biscuit. Son of a biscuit? The problem is that that ability is going to be reset if the card ever gets duplicated, which is probably fine. Let me just go through. So let me get the Mandrake here, because the Mandrake applies self-paralysis. It's always interesting. Thank you, the Dollite, and welcome back to the stream. I could do buff container card buff added. Oh yeah, I think the reason why I didn't want to do that is because that's not... I mean, I think it's fine. The problem is that can happen outside of a normal combat flow right now because it's just detecting whenever a debuff gets added. So I don't know. Like, it's a fine solution, but it's just not the ideal solution that I think I would have in my game. But once again, we have to choose between ideal and pragmatic a lot of times, and the pragmatic solution is just to do it the easy way for now. Okay, so now we've got this Mandrake, which is going to paralyze that. So let's take a look. So this has 2 damage now. I mostly just want to see that damage preserved. So this has 4 damage now. 6 damage. This may actually end up growing. This may end up... Might be too strong if I do it permanently. Because I already ramped this up to 10 damage with just this one thing. So maybe permanently isn't the way to go. I tried to learn something similar to what you're doing, and it's hard. Yeah. Back in my day, we had back buffer copy 2D and we loved it, right? You're welcome. Okay, so this permanently is not going to work, I don't think. It's too powerful. What I can do is I can buff the damage per stack and then make it not permanent. But now we're gonna end up with another problem, which is that I need to be able to reset these stacks after the combat ends now. Oh goodness. So let me look. I think I have that in the base card already. Reset state. Reset all ability states. Where is this called? Reset all ability states. Is this not used anywhere? Okay, well I guess this doesn't need to be public, so I don't know why that's public. Reset post-execution state. Reset cooldown, reset all ability states, transient state. Find implementations, ability type tracker provider, transient. So what is transient execution state? I think transient execution state is after each execution, the state should be reset. Yeah. And then transient state is just for that combat encounter. Okay. I'm going to create a new file. Generic transient state. Okay, generic transient state. We're just going to do action reset state func. This is transient state, public void reset state func. Okay. Generic transient state. So in here, in my Lambo and ring, new generic transient state, stacks equals 0. Okay, we'll do reset state here. So where is that actually being called then? Reset all ability states, get all flattened abilities, collect composed abilities recursively. Okay, so that should work. Goodness gracious, okay. Damage increases by 4 every time this card is paralyzed. So let's try that now. May not be too bad if you change it to 1. When you have lots of cards in your board, the chances of being paralyzed will be a lot lower. Yeah, the problem is like it's still going to be affected by the damage scaling. So even if I made it 1 to start, you could upgrade it 4 times and it would be increased by 4, you know, and that would get out of hand very quickly. So what I'll do is I'll just increase the damage that it gains. And then that should hopefully help a little bit. Because now I can upgrade it. So if I go here, this is going to say damage increases by 5 now. Yeah, so damage increases by 5 every time this card is paralyzed. So it's got 5 damage there, 10 damage there. Gonna have 15 damage. So that ramps up very hard. Especially with this Mandrake, it's not applying a paralysis for too long. So if you manage to get this on a card with a low turn cooldown, and with something like the Mandrake, which doesn't paralyze for that long, I think it's going to be fine. Maybe damage is added permanently once per combat if paralyzed at least once. We could do something like that too, yeah. So it could be something like the first time this card is paralyzed in combat, gain 4 damage permanently. That would be a better way to do it. Maybe we should do that. What do you guys think? That would be kind of like a nice middle ground of like having this card that's permanently being buffed, but then, you know, restraining it from growing too much. So it doesn't necessarily become a game of like paralyzing it as much as possible. It becomes a game of paralyzing it at least once, right? That could be interesting. Maybe we'll give that a shot. Hello, Ben. Welcome, welcome. Lurk. Hello, Neozoid. So, I'm a fan of permanent buffs. Let's see if we can make that work. So the problem is I need to check for unique combat encounters. Like, I need to be able to discern somehow that the card was paralyzed at least once. But I need to prevent those stacks from increasing past the first one for that combat. How am I going to do that? I'm thinking about doing something like private int applications this combat. Something like that. Oh, that's not going to work though. No, I can't do that. Actually, let's see. Maybe it'll just be easy. Yeah, maybe, I mean, there's a simple way around this now that I'm thinking about it. Var previous stacks equals stacks. I don't need to necessarily make a whole new ability for this. I could just track this previous stacks here. And then when I go to reset state, instead of setting the stacks equal to 0, I'm going to set previous stacks equal to stacks. And then it's got this card buff listener. If buff is not paralysis debuff, or previous stacks is not equal to stacks, return. So this is basically going to say we're only going to increment the stacks if we are currently equal to the previous stacks. But as soon as we increment that, we're not going to be equal to the previous stacks anymore. That's going to lock it from acquiring any more stacks during that combat. And then when this reset state gets called here, we're going to set that previous stacks value to the current stacks value so that this can kick in again. Okay. So damage increases by value scalar permanently. The first time this card is paralyzed in combat. So we'll do that instead. And so now I'm going to knock this back down to 2. Now we can try that and see if that works a little bit nicer. What if upgrading it increased the amount of times it can be paralyzed? Yeah, we could either make it increase the amount of times it gets paralyzed or just increase the flat damage. I think it's the same effect, right? It's still like an additive scaling. It's just depending on how you word it. Why not GDScript? I like C# better. I like the structure it gives me. I like the things I can do with it, like interfaces, abstract classes. I like being able to use link, write extension methods, all that good stuff. It could be a % chance to permanently increase damage on each paralyzed, and the upgrade increases the % chance instead of the damage gain, so the damage would also be kept reasonable. That is an option too. You want and there. Oh, thank you. Right. No, it's not. No, I want or. If it's not a paralysis debuff, or the previous stacks are not equal, return. So this is going to work. Yeah, I think this is right. Am I missing something? This is an early return. So if the buff is not a paralysis debuff, or the previous stacks are not equal to the current stacks. So that means that this can only pursue if that's inverted, which is the buff has to be a paralysis debuff and the previous stacks have to be equal to the stacks. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it right. Oh yeah, I should have just kept reading. Never mind, you're returning there, yeah. Gosh, I was almost embarrassed for a moment. I was like, I'm here, I'm this massive, super popular Godot expert, and I can't even get basic basic if check. I mean, I wouldn't put it past me, honestly. I do that kind of stuff all the time. And then I go and debug for 10 minutes and it's like, oh, I made a basic elementary logic error. Very nice. Very nice. Anyway, I think the once per combat would help, but maybe have the same issue as the Iron Gauntlet had where it was just very strong. Yeah, that could be the case too. How do you feel about modifiers which says has a chance to do X versus using absolute values like has a 5% chance to do X? Both outcomes are the same, but different framing to the player. Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of game that you're making. I think it's important for players to understand the actual numbers that are at play in my game, because, yeah, I just think that's appropriate for my game, because, like, you know, you surf it, if you say has a chance, and a player doesn't know if that's a 1% chance, they don't know if it's a 10% chance. Now, I think people are generally very bad at judging probabilities and percentages generally. Like 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you frame it as like 1 in 20 executions or whatever, and you're doing dozens and dozens of executions, that's actually reasonably common, right? So I could see the argument for hiding the number as well, but I think it probably depends on the game. I don't know. I'm just going to surface the numbers exactly to the player. Hello, RN Genesis. Welcome back. Hello, the Ant. Good to see you. All right, let's see if this works. So we can keep it like this and just see how it goes. But let me just make sure that that logic works to begin with. Deal 2 damage, yep. So yeah, it didn't increment again. So we'll just go to the next combat now. So this should say 4 damage now. Yeah, look at that. Okay. Now, one other tricky thing here is that, what do I do with alchemy for this? Do I want to carry over that that value? Right now, if I put this through alchemy, I think it's just going to reset. So if I do this, see, it says deal 0 damage now. Anyway. So now there's a question. So that's one question, is like, do I want to copy it over into the alchemy? Or is resetting it okay? And then the other thing I want to look at is, do I want to do a query target provider so I can do highlighting here? I think so. Let me do that. Var, this is just for highlighting purposes. Var query target provider is equal to new query target provider. Query target provider dot query options is equal to query options dot board inventory component dot query directions dot entire board. Man, query target provider dot query target query options dot query target board is equal to true. So if these are both true, query source board, query target board. What in the heck? iBoard queryable, here we go. Yeah, so that should work. I should be able to query the target and the source together. So I'm only adding this query target provider to do highlighting so that it will highlight any cards that have paralysis. I think I can do this. Card has ability of type. Buff applicator. Get all flattened abilities of type any. Okay. Then we add the query target provider here. Like so. And that should allow me to highlight now. So if I hover over the Lambone ring, I should see that highlight the Mandrake to let me know that that's a relevant ability. Yeah, look at that. So now it will tell me when I hover over it which cards have the ability to apply paralysis. I don't know if I'll keep that, but that is a nice way of, I guess, letting the player know. The only problem is it does show that. So I don't know, maybe I don't want to do that, but oh well. Maybe you carry over half the damage gained. All right, thanks for joining Alien. Always good to see you. Is there a way to make it so that the original card keeps the stacks, but the other cards get half the stacks? Maybe that could be a reagent's job when we make more abilities like this. Yeah, I mean, the big problem is that I don't really have a good way of transferring the value over to begin with. So the problem here is that when I have abilities that are made like this, whenever the ability is duplicated, which needs to happen in alchemy because it could end up on multiple cards, right? And all of those cards can't share a reference to the same ability. I mean, they could in theory, but that would be prone to breakage, right? So I don't want to do that. So I need to duplicate the ability. And the problem is trying to get this internal state that's just, you know, defined in this lambda function here over into the duplicated version of this ability is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky. So I'd have to somehow get this stacks value over into the new one and set that. I mean, the only way that I really thought about doing this is if I go into my composed ability here, there's this duplicate internal. So what I might be able to do is I might be able to just have a duplication func. How would that work though? Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky. Anyway, probably not going to figure this out now, but yeah, that's the main problem is I just don't have a way of nicely transferring these stacks over to the new instance. But if I figure out a way around that, then yeah, it will become easy to just pass the internal state here to the duplicated version, which means that it would survive through alchemy with all of its stacks that it might have currently. But anyway, that is a problem for another time, I think. I actually think I'm going to remove this. I don't really like that. That implies that the Lambone ring has the ability to apply paralysis. So we'll just leave it unhighlighted for now. Overrideable function in the card class to handle any of that logic. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I just don't know how to pull this stacks value out of here. Obviously, if I put like a duplication function here, you know, duplication func or something, I would have access to the stacks in this class, but I don't know how I would set it on the other one. Because I wouldn't be able to do other.stacks. That wouldn't work. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It is a problem for the ages. It is a problem for the ages, and I am yet just a humble game dev. Hello, Tempura Cat Games. Welcome back. It's going well. How are you doing? Can the lambda take a parameter and bind it to the callable? I think I would need to do something like that. Like, I think what I could potentially do. Yeah, I would have to do something weird, like composed ability have to take void. The composed ability right now, yeah, it has I don't know if this is what you're asking, but the ability factory is a function that returns the ability configuration object. So basically, yeah, this is returning all the abilities that I'm creating up here. And then it has a scaling function, description function. So the composed ability here, it's returning this ability configuration. I don't know. Probably don't understand it enough. Yeah, you and me both. No, I understand the system just fine. It's just one of the weaknesses. Like, this system is very nice for just flexibly defining abilities because I don't need to create a new class for each unique ability and all that stuff. Of course, the problem of not having a class for each unique ability is that there's not an easy way to override duplication functionality. So it's got its pros and cons, but I'm sure there's a clever way that I can figure this out through a series of like passing functions around or whatever. I think I probably need like some kind of duplication function to be a generic sort of function so that I can define like what data needs to be passed into the duplication function and what data should be returned from it. So if I could somehow define like a generic function signature that could just take, you know, the arguments that I define at this level, then I can see that becoming easier to do, because then I can, from the duplicated class, I can say, okay, pass in all of my internal data. So if I duplicate this ability, it will have a stacks value of 0. And we'll say, okay, pass the stacks value into the duplicate function as like, this is what my current stacks are. And then I can get a reference in that function as well, or somehow define that this is the data that I want out of the class being duplicated. Something like that. I think, like I said, I'm going to do something weird with like hooking functions together. Yeah, I mean, I think it's better maybe to think about the function as like a get internal state function, and the get internal state function can just return anything, like it's a generic return type if possible. And I can return any data that I need out of the get internal state. And then when I go to duplicate this, I can have a separate duplication function which can fetch the internal state of the object being duplicated and then apply that to the new instance. But it has to know, right? It's like, I don't have any overridable functions or anything. I don't have access to this internal state because it's inside of this lambda function here. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, but we don't need to worry about that right now. I think what we should do now is we should figure out a new card to create that can have this ability, because this ability is not going on the Lambone ring. So this ability where the damage grows every time it's paralyzed for the first time in combat. So we need some kind of player card that is thematically appropriate for that ability. I already did a bat, so we can do done. Actually, delete this. So yeah, we'll figure something out. But anyway, I will be right back in 3 minutes. I'm going to take a quick break and we will continue on when I get back. All right, I'm back. Let's figure out what kind of card we want to draw here. A torture wheel would be a good one. Idol, Ouroboros, gold of some kind. I think I already did that. Some kind of random alchemy output aberration. Ooh, I should do that. That sounds interesting. Not right now, but just like add a little bit of extra interest to the alchemy system. Constantly, let's see. A flagellum, a spike collar, stretch table, scourge tombstone corpse pile. Interesting. I already did the Nautilus cup. Let's just move this to done, I suppose. A goat grinder. Chimera rat in a jar. I honestly don't know. Plague doctor. I think maybe one of these. Let me do that one, I think. Let's see. Plague room. Yeah, let's do that. Not flagellum, flagrum. Okay, we'll do this one. Actually, let me take a look at how many weapon cards do we have for the player. Card statistics tool. Player card tag counts. We only have 7 weapons, so this is actually going to be great. Okay, so we'll do that, and then we'll do card creation tool. Flagrum. We'll do 1x2 or 2x1. Let's see. We have 8. Oh no, that's enemy. We have 11 1x2, and we have 9 2x1. So maybe we'll make it 2x1. Flagrum, create. Okay. Go to A-Sprite, goat grinder, but no chupacabra. I actually don't know if I'm going to do the goat grinder. Maybe it'll just transform into a generic meat grinder. You never know. Okay, so here we go. Do a new layer, load default palette, lock this one. Okay. So we're just getting the shape down right now. Yeah, we can do something like that. So the shape is looking all right. I think I'm gonna just move this a little bit though. Yeah, that looks better. We'll do this. Okay, I think that shape is pretty good. So let's see then what we can do with the shading here. So I'm gonna make all these red to start. But we're gonna want to put little spikes on it. Okay, something like that. And then maybe here and here. Move this over a little bit. Yeah, I think that'll work. that'll work. And then for the whip parts, I guess... Oops. Yeah, that'll work. We could even make these purple to start. Yeah, that works. Okay. I think that's respectable. Maybe I'll fill this in too. Yeah, I think that's respectable. One thing I haven't figured out how to do is that enchanted border effect you have on some cards. Is that a shader? Does it matter between a UI and a Node 2D shader? Yeah, so the enchanted border, so it's a combination of effects. So this enchant effect here. So there's that, right? So what this is a scrolling noise texture that changes the color of the noise that's sampled based on the noise value. So at higher values, it turns into that kind of green color, and then at lower values, it turns into that blue color, and then it's transparent otherwise. So you get like this like topology to it, where it goes to blue and then to green. And then this is just scrolling. And so you can see how there's gaps here. But what happens is that because I'm running at a low resolution, these get chunked down. These sections get chunked down into like single pixels because this is 1 pixel wide. So that's how I get like, you've got blue streaks, blue pixels running up the card, but then every so often you'll get like a sparkly pixel because it's a lighter color, right? And then that is basically just following the border texture. So I actually have different textures for different parts of the card, or at least different mask textures. And the mask textures are just pure white, and I can use these mask textures inside of a shader. So I basically just like, I have a UV, I have a texture with the dimensions that match the dimensions of the card. So then sampling the UVs for the purposes of doing the shader is very straightforward, right? Because I can just take the UV, look at the color of the pixel. If the pixel is white, then apply that color from the noise. And if it's transparent, then we just don't render anything. We just take the transparency from that texture. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. But yeah, it's actually very simple. It's just a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by the low resolution, kind of crunching things down into something else. So sick. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Welcome back to the stream. Yeah, if you're asking me like how am I doing an effect, it's like it's usually, the answer is usually there's some kind of noise texture involved. I'm definitely using noise as a crutch, but from my understanding, using noise is actually very common in shaders. So maybe it's not a crutch after all. Anyway, I think this flagrum is looking good. So let's go to the flagrum here. We gotta update this art. Oh wait, it was already... Oh wait, I never exported it. So I'm just doing this completely wrong. Export flagrum. Now it should be updated here, yeah. Okay, flagrum, turn cooldown. Let's do 9. This is a weapon. We'll make it a ritual weapon, why not? Actually, let's just make it a weapon. Okay, so now let's go to the flagrum class. And we're just gonna take this composed ability that I just made out. And we're gonna put it on the flagrum here. Egads. All right. Cool. Project settings. Let's see if that works. It feels good to add a new weapon card because that... I don't have a whole lot of weapon cards in the game for players to use. Oops, I forgot to set the dimensions. I knew I was forgetting something. This is 2x1. And it doesn't show up because it doesn't have room. We'll get it in there eventually. Okay. Deal 0 damage. Damage increases by 2 permanently the first time this card is paralyzed in combat. Sweet. All right. I think that looks pretty good. Can't complain about that. Maybe I can complain about it a little bit. I just want to see making some of these blue, if that would make a difference. Make this more curved as well. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit nicer. Okay. All right, so that's added. Maybe I will also do... I'll do another ability on here, actually. Let's do 2 bleed. Okay. I don't need to test that. That's going to work. So, famous last words, I know. All right, so flag room. Where did I put that? Oh, here. So that's done. This needs to have flavor text added. Okay, some kind of random alchemy output aberration. This will be a lot of fun to add, I think. I think it's going to be... So the idea behind this is that maybe you get some kind of minion out of alchemy sometimes. So there's a small chance to get this minion, and it has like some... I don't know, some kind of interesting ability. We'll see. But let me think about what do I want to do. Maybe it'll just be like a 1x1 card. I'll call it, yeah, we'll call it an aberration. Card statistics tool. I have a lot of 1x1 cards, but I think it'll be appropriate to make it a 1x1 card. Card creation tool. We'll call it aberration. I hope I spelled it correctly. Yeah. 1x1 create. Maybe we'll just start doodling. So we have an abomination and an aberration. Well, default palette. Okay. The kind of idea that I have. Did I do this on the wrong layer? No. I'm just going to do some coloring in here just to make it the parts separated. trying to do like eyes or something. Actually, maybe those were okay. Well, I don't know how to put them back. Oh well. I guess this could work. I still don't really like this eye over here. Try something different here. I kind of like, I mean, he's goofy looking, but wonder if let's see. Yeah, I don't really know what to do about this. Oh my. It looks kind of weird. Oh well. It's probably fine. Problem is that doesn't... Yeah, I don't know. Hey, okay. Put that back. I think that looks fine. It's supposed to just look like a melty piece of goop. Oops. Well, I did this wrong, that's all right. I just don't know if I like these colors. Let's merge this down. I'm just kind of messing around at this point. Trying to figure out if I can make this look decent. Kind of like that. Yeah. All right. He's kind of cute. Anyway. Let's see. The most interesting part about this card is going to be how I acquire it through the alchemy. But we got to think of some abilities for this guy as well. Okay. So let's focus on, let's figure out how to get it out of the alchemy first, and then we will mess with all the other stuff. So if I go to my, let's see, add aberration. Oh, I do, actually, let's configure it first. So I do want to exclude this from the loot table. So that cannot be included. We're going to make it a minion. We're going to make it alchemical. Let's give it a turn cooldown of 7. I don't even know what the ability is going to be, but why not? Okay, so we've got the aberration now. And let's make it possible to get that through the alchemy manager. So aberration. Okay. Alchemy manager. So I'm probably going to have like a private const float aberration chance. I'm gonna make this actually more rare than the than the legendary. Or maybe I should turn the legendary down. We won't mess with it for now. Aberration chance. Oh. Card ID constants generator. I need to spit this out to a file for sure. Anyway. Card registry. Okay. The alchemy manager here. What I'm going to do is get outputs. If mathUtil.rng.randf is less than or equal to aberration chance. Then we're going to do result.add card factory.create card from ID card ID.aberration true. I think that's it. So obviously what we want to do is just put this up to 100% and we can get the aberration out of it. Now I want the aberration to be something special, so it's going to be relatively powerful, I think, but let me just do this real quick. So we do this, oops. Hey, we got an aberration. Nice. Take this. So we're going to make the aberration something very special because since you can only take one card out of the alchemy, it needs to be more appealing in a lot of cases than whatever cards you were alchemizing. So I think this should be a relatively powerful card. And there's a number of ways to make it powerful. So we can give it a low turn cooldown, which it kind of already has. We can increase the crit chance, crit multiplier. We can also give it some abilities that are just naturally very strong. So let me think. One thing that might help here, board configuration editor. One thing that might help is loading this up here. And then we can look through the player cards. I need to change this tool to just be a proper gallery of cards. This would be a good tool to check the loading too. I think the loading of the cards is rather cumbersome on the PC, but we'll see. Or on the CPU. But anyway, so let's just look through these cards here. Aberration, Abomination. I need to redo the Alembic. I don't think the Alembic is that good. So what should the aberration do? I want to redo Swarm as well. I had an idea for it last night and I promptly forgot it, so hopefully it comes back to me. Frog needs to be redrawn. Oh my gosh. I'm just looking at these. I can't believe I drew all these things. it just kind of hit me how much I've improved just by looking at all these things. Anyway. Do we want to give the aberration copy abilities? Do we want to give it poison abilities? What do we want to do with this? The aberration has to be strong enough to be more appealing than the alchemy outputs. Hello, Artem. Welcome, welcome. Amazing stuff. Thank you, Emerson. Thank you. Yeah. I think there's a couple cards in here that need to be redrawn, like the torch could use a little bit more finesse. The windmill could as well. The frog definitely needs to be redrawn. I think mosquito swarm could use some love as well. The leech could probably use some love. I had an idea for Swarm the other day. It was to have a trigger for a specific ability. For example, Swarm, damage 2. Then whenever a card triggers Swarm, all the other cards do a specific thing. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think what I was thinking along the lines of is like either it could... Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. That's actually a very interesting way approach. Because what I could do is I could put Swarm at the ability level. And so Swarm becomes like a wrapper around an ability on the card. And so, yeah, whenever a Swarm ability is triggered, it triggers all other Swarm abilities at the same time, right? So instead of Swarm being like a top level ability, instead Swarm is a modifier that's applied to an ability. So in the same way that ability projection works, so like projects to allied cards on the right edge of the board Echo, right? So this ability Echo is being wrapped in a projection ability so that it gets applied to other cards. So I could do something similar for Swarm where it's like Swarm, deal 4 true damage or whatever. And then that ability could potentially just, yeah, it can execute normally if it's a member of the card that is currently going. So if you imagine this Banshee head had Swarm around this true damage, it would still deal true damage during its turn, but if something else on the board executed a Swarm ability, it would trigger that one to run immediately as well. So something like that. I think that's a good idea. I still think that's probably going to be too powerful, but you know, maybe not super powerful because now a specific ability has to be wrapped with Swarm in order to work. And maybe that would rein it in enough. And then of course I can introduce an alchemical ingredient that adds Swarm to a random ability. So yeah, I think there's massive opportunities there to do something more interesting with Swarm, because right now it's kind of an Echo, which, yeah, is a problem for a number of purposes. One, it's too strong, and the other one is it doesn't have a very strong identity as like a unique ability compared to Echo. I mean, I guess it kind of does, but yeah, that sounds about what I was thinking about. Yeah. I think that's basically what you were saying. So, I guess my modification is just Swarm becomes a generic modifier that can be applied to any ability, right? It's not that I have to come up with individual Swarm type abilities. It's just a modifier applied to one. Would you allow to have commander type cards? What do you have in mind? So I think is it cheating to use the pixelize to make sprites? I don't know in what context. Like, I would say that if you're just grabbing images off of the internet and pixelizing them to make sprites, then that's kind of cheating, I guess. I mean, I guess you could make an argument that it's fair use because it's transformative or whatever, but I think that if you have the rights to use an image for commercial purposes, for whatever purpose, and you want to crunch those down into pixelated sprites, but they still retain, or maybe you crunch them down and apply some quantization to like restrict the colors to a palette, and you want to use that in your game, I think as long as you're being visually consistent, that could actually be a very interesting art style. So if you're not an artist, you can't, or you don't want to draw things by hand or whatever, and that's a way that you can make a game look interesting, then I would say, yeah, there's no problem with it. I mean, there's not really, when it comes to making art, there's like no cheating. It's like unless you're blatantly stealing stuff, but aside from that, it's like use whatever process and use whatever tools create the thematic output that you're looking for. You know what I mean? So if you want to make a game that centers around taking high resolution images and crunching them down into pixelated sprites, and that's what your entire game looks like, then I could see that working. Of course, I don't think you're going to be able to make a very visually appealing game if that's all that you do. I think you will need to consider doing something like doing some kind of quantization. You'll also have to be careful with the shading of all the things, because if you take an image of a building that's in shadow and then you have the player and they're fully lit and you try to just crunch those things down to pixels, that's going to maybe look a little bit inconsistent. So I think the consistency is the key. The technique doesn't matter that much. It's the consistency that matters. Oh, I just mean that you could have an alpha wolf that triggers the swarm abilities on other cards. Oh, I see. Yeah. That would be interesting. Yeah. You're welcome, J. Jonah Jack. All right, so back to the matter at hand. What ability are we going to give the aberration? Wish I asked advice for how you did your board games a lot earlier. I just started a fresh project and went with the tile map layer. Already got an item I can drag around and that fits the grid. A lot smoother than going all control nodes. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad that my advice helped you. And yeah, I think the big thing is just keeping the data separate from the visual representation too. And then the tile map, yeah, that's just the visual representation, so it's easier to snap to grid. I mean, you can make drag and drop work and like handle mouse clicks on the tile map itself, but that will also work. All right, what are we gonna do for this aberration? I need an ability. I need an ability or several ability ideas. Damn it. Come on. Aberration. I was just thinking one thing that could be interesting is having it transform or something. I mean, I could just make it, one thing that I could do is I could just make it apply a small amount of like all kinds of things. So for instance, it could apply 1 bleed, it could deal 1 damage, it could apply 1 fire, it could apply 1 poison, it could heal for 1, and just have all of those on it, because then it becomes like a way of triggering anything else that might be scaling off of all those abilities on your board. So it just applies a little bit of everything, and it kind of becomes this generic like status applicator card that if you just slot it into a 1x1 grid on your board, then it triggers anything that scales off of each of those individual abilities. Oh yeah, no problem. I'm here to help. So if you want to just come into the stream and just ask a question right away, I have no problem with that. But yeah, glad you're here. Welcome to the stream. That might be an interesting thing to do. I don't know if that's going to be appealing enough. I don't know if that's going to be appealing enough as a card, but I could see that being useful. Just feels like if I've got a card that I can only get one from 1% of alchemies, maybe it should be more powerful than that. I mean, there's nothing preventing me from adding other cards that can also come out of alchemy as well, but let me look at my other abilities that I have written down here. Steal ability from enemy card. This is an interesting one. Consume or destroy a card and gain permanent power. So I could see this like absorbing the ability of a card next to it and destroying that card. It's kind of like a quasi way to do alchemy, but in a more controlled manner. Would that be interesting? Could it be an alchemy focus card that applies a random ability to other cards? Oh, so you mean like make it a reagent? That's an interesting idea too. I like the idea of consuming a card. What if you could evolve it so that it fits your build, like you start with 1 and everything, but you sacrifice 1 HP of healing for 1 point of poison? Yeah, having it evolve in some way would be an interesting idea as well. Yeah, I'm not sure. I kind of want to, I mean, I like the idea of consuming an ability for sure. Like the idea of consuming an ability and destroying a card after it gets consumed. Problem is that kind of sidesteps the alchemy system. Well, here's what I'm going to do for now. I'm going to do my initial idea. I need to keep thinking on if I want to change this. So this just ends up being, oops. Okay, let's take a look at that. I mean, there's a lot of good ideas. It's just I can, you know, it's a question of what do I put on this specific card. Those other ideas can definitely be done as other cards. So put this here, put that there. So it's just a little aberration. Maybe that makes sense. I kind of think that makes sense thematically. It's an aberration. It's got like all this stuff happening. But that's just going to serve to trigger anything that scales off of any of these abilities. Cool. All right, well, that will be fine for now. I'm glad we got the aberration into the game. And then I need to turn this back down to 0.01. Cool. And then what? I need to make sure to make a note that I need flavor text for this. Maybe if it's a card that is only obtainable through alchemy, you can get alchemical residue from alchemy, make it stronger based on unlocked tiles. That is a good idea. Yeah, make it stronger based on unlocked tiles. Yeah, we could do something like that. I'll have to think on it. I'll have to think on it for sure. But anyway, that's it for the stream today. I'm going to go eat lunch. I'm hungry. But if you like, you can wishlist Alchemortis on Steam. You can also join the Patreon for a number of perks. The main benefit is that you'll get early access to the playtest, which is coming out at the end of this month. So you'll be able to play the game for 1 week early before the playtest gets released to the general public. But if you don't want to support on Patreon, that's totally fine. As I said, the playtest will be available for everyone who wants to try it. It's just that Patreon members will get early access first. And I also just put up a new video today on Patreon for the Patreon members. It's a short video, 90-second tutorial on instance placeholder. So if you're interested in that, that may be another incentive. But that YouTube video will be out tomorrow as well for everyone. So anyway, you can also join the Discord. That's linked below as well. Everything's linked below. If you're interested in supporting me, I would appreciate that. Just check out the description. And maybe we'll do a bonus stream this afternoon. I don't know. We'll see how the day goes. But otherwise, I'll see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.